number of troops inside of Gaza. The fighting is supposedly at its lowest point since the aftermath of October 7th and Hamas's military operation leading to Israel's genocidal onslaught. And amid these reports, though, you have Netanyahu announcing that there is a quote-unquote date set for the invasion of Rafah, or a continuation of this war, this time in Rafah, where many Palestinians have been huddled in due to the massive displacement and destruction of the entire Gaza Strip. So there's been a debate, though. The debate inside of the political establishment, the media establishment, is on the one hand this kind of lamenting over, oh no, there's a power vacuum with relation to Gaza because Hamas, it is supposedly no longer ruling the Strip because of this warfare. It could very well in the near future because it hasn't been destroyed. And then there are others who are saying, wow, this is going very well for Israel. Look at how they are drawing down. Scott, what is the reality amid this debate, which appears to be, as you have said many times with regard to Ukraine, a lot of kind of spin that's happening inside of the West?
Israel said when this conflict started that they had two goals. First goal was the military destruction, eradication of Hamas as the destruction, eradication of Hamas as a military entity. The second was the political destruction of Hamas as a governing entity. So today we have a situation where the Israeli military has withdrawn from everywhere in Gaza except this narrow strip that divides the half of Gaza from the southern half from the northern half. The Hamas military has moved into these places. They occupy it again. Hamas hasn't been defeated, not even close. Have they taken casualties? Of course they have. But have they been defeated? No. So Israel has failed across the board to defeat Hamas. Who's the governing entity in Gaza? Hamas. And Hamas is also negotiating with the Palestinian Liberation Organization about a post-conflict, about a role in a post-conflict government of a Palestinian state. It's something that Russia has been brokering. So as we speak, the Israelis have not defeated Hamas militarily, and they have not defeated Hamas politically. And we're more than 6 months into this conflict. And Israel's been compelled to withdraw. Now, let's talk about why Israel withdrew. First of all, there's a crisis right now with Iran. I just want to point out that tomorrow is Eid al-Fitr, I believe it is, the end of the Ramadan month of fasting, very holy day. That's Wednesday. Thursday, it ain't Eid. It's not a holy day. And the Iranians may start attacking Israel. And it could be, a whole new phase of this conflict. For the past 2 years, Israel has carried out extensive war games designed to what they call stress test the system. The worst case scenario. What happens if everybody goes to war with Israel at once? What happens if Hezbollah starts firing missiles and there's action in Lebanon? What happens if the Iranians join in? What happens if the Syrians join in? What happens if Hamas starts carrying out terrorist attacks and there's a new intifada in the West Bank? How do we organize for this? And they did. They stress tested twice. I just want to give away the ending. They lost all the time, but it doesn't matter. They stress tested the system. But here's the important thing. In both years, the way they simulated Gaza, they never had Hamas breaking out and invading and all that. What they said is, we will send a token number of brigades that will contain Gaza and that will prevent any terrorist groups from breaking out and blowing up this and blowing up that or firing missiles. We have the Iron Dome in. The West Bank will pacify it, but it won't blow up, which means that the vast majority of their troops could be allocated to the north to fight conflicts against Hezbollah and Syria. And their air force could be totally focused towards supporting the conflict between Hezbollah and Syria and carrying out long-range strikes against Iran. That was the way they did it. What's the situation today? You had 60% of the Israeli army in Gaza. That means there ain't nothing left to do the war game up north. And so now you have a situation that Iran is threatening to attack Israel. If Iran does attack Israel, there will have to be an Israeli retaliation. And there's no guarantee that the Israelis will be constrained in their retaliation, which means they may hit Iran in a way that creates the need for Iran to strike back. Now you have a general war. Hezbollah will join in at that point with everything they have. And now Israel is facing a full-scale war against Hezbollah and Iran. They need troops for this. They need a lot of troops for this. So they pull the bulk of their forces out of Gaza, and they align them up in a secondary line behind the front where they are rearming, retraining, re-equipping, resting. But they're there as a force in readiness in case Hezbollah starts making moves. Now Israel has chess pieces on the board to move that aren't tied down in Gaza. So I think that's the main thing that happened. Now they still have preserved, or let's say it doesn't escalate like that. These brigades now will be rested. They'll be re-equipped, and they can be brought back to make an attack on Rafah. But I'll tell you this: Benjamin Netanyahu will never attack Rafah so long as there's a real potential of conflict with Iran and Hezbollah, because it's a losing proposition. Rafah will suck up so many Israeli resources, it's not even funny. And again, the Israelis won't win. They'll kill a bunch of civilians, but they're not going to win. They're not going to destroy. Today we have Hamas still firing rockets out of the north. Out of the north of Gaza, they're still firing rockets. They're ambushing the Israelis in the center part, in Khan Yunis, where they're not supposed to be any Hamas left. They're still there killing Israelis. So, the fact is, no matter what Israel does in Rafah, they'll just kill civilians. They're not going to defeat Hamas. And I think there's also growing recognition within the Israeli military that this is the reality, that they've lost. I mean, I've read more and more articles coming from not just retired military officers in Israel, but active duty who are speaking confidentially to people saying, we lost this war. We've suffered so greatly. We're not defeating these guys. We don't control Gaza. We don't own the night. All these sort of things. So I think that this withdrawal is a recognition of the fact that Israel doesn't control the Gaza situation, is willing to cede control of Gaza temporarily so that they can position themselves to be able to respond to Hezbollah and maybe a larger conflict with Iran.
A couple of things. I'll say this, and I'll go back to Ukraine for a second just to make my point. When the Crocus thing happened, when various things happened, right? The attacks on Belgrade, this and that, and there were a lot of discussions. My opinion was always this: Russians are winning. They know how to play the game. They understand when somebody, the Russians are winning. And so out of desperation, the Ukrainians would try to do something outlandish to get the Russians to do something else, to put their resources on something else other than the front lines, to do something else, to give them a chance to regroup or point the fingers at them. The Russians absorbed those hits and just kept plugging away, right? The Iranians invented chess. Chess was invented in Iran. I forgot what it was called, but it was invented in Iran. They understand the game. And everybody, you and I, every of us talked about this. Oh, the Israelis, this is a trap for Iran. They do this, then Iran strikes back real hard, and then the U.S. comes in and they've got everything. Okay, if we know that, the Iranians know that. And the Iranians, over the course of years, have been very measured in their reactions, right? While certainly their people at home are angry, so they're going to have to do something. But the Iranians understand that they're winning. They know how to take a win. My dad used to always say that, know how to take a win. Anybody can lose, but a lot of people don't know how to win. I used to do sales, right? And in sales, you talk to somebody to make the sale. And at some point, the person says, yeah, okay, I'll sign the paper. There are salesmen that still keep talking. after they made the sale. Shut up. Oh, you'll sign? Yes. You do the paperwork. They sign a contract. When I was doing sales, everything was written, and you're done. But because you can talk your people out of it, you got to know when you've won and take the win. I think that the Iranians understand. They're desperate. They're in trouble. They're trying to get us to do something stupid. We're not going to do it. If I were the Iranians, what do I think the Iranians would do? Maybe hit through their allies, maybe hit the Golan Heights, because the Golan Heights isn't in Israel, is it? It's illegally occupied in Syria. They can hit the Golan Heights, but never hit Israel proper. So I think there are options for the Iranians, but I don't think they're just going to start throwing missiles into Tel Aviv. I think they understand that in desperation, Israel's trying to get them to do something crazy, but I think they're going to continue to take the win that they're getting, and they're going to be measured in their response, and it'll be through allies, proxies, whatever terms you want to use. But yeah, I think, yeah, they're going to respond, but I don't think they're going to do something stupid that's going to give the Israelis what they want. We all understand that, and the Iranians understand that.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people have been asking me, and I've seen it in comments and even in the live chat here about, is Iran bluffing? Is Iran bluffing with what it said? And I'm curious, Scott, if you could talk more. I've been covering the regional situation, and you mentioned this kind of stress test. What happens to Israel if all forces, the entire axis of resistance decides to get involved? I mean, we're seeing some pretty incredible things, even just from a piece by piece level. You have Yemen, the Iraqi resistance. They're hitting Israel lightly. I mean, it's not heavy hits, but they're hitting Israel, and we're talking about a long distance, having to go through airspace. These aren't border countries with Israel. Could you talk about what you make of this talk about Iran bluffing, and how, maybe you could reiterate or talk more about the regional situation? Because for me, Gaza was always going to lead to that, especially when Israel decided to kind of take the gloves off and go full on genocide.
Yeah. First of all, when we speak of Iran and their struggle against Israel, you have to include the so-called axis of resistance. They're one and the same. I mean, I know, Syria's a sovereign state. Hezbollah is a party within a sovereign state. Lebanon, the Houthi of Yemen are loyal to themselves, etc. So it's not as though Iran is sort of the lord of everything, but Iran is the strategic thinker here, and Iran has been able to use the exact axis of resistance to get amazing results out of Israel, and indeed to be a distraction against the United States. I mean, the United States right now spends a lot of time worrying about attacks from Iraqi and Syrian proxy militias. They have to hold air power in reserve that could otherwise be freed up for other contingencies and things of that nature. The Iraqis, for the first time, are striking targets inside Israel, and successfully. And the Houthi have shut down shipping in the Gulf of Aden and in the Red Sea through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. That's cost Israel tens of billions of dollars in terms of economic harm. So, and Hezbollah has been carrying out a very, if we weren't talking about the casualties in Gaza, everybody would be talking about the casualties between Israel and Hezbollah, because it's just like a full-scale war. I mean, they're losing people and resources on both sides. Hezbollah hasn't just been sitting on its hands on this one. So, Iran has a lot of options to hurt Israel, and they're winning. That's the other thing I need to point out, is that, everybody's expecting something from Iran, but let me just put it in perspective. Iran's winning. You're winning. So why do you have to do something dramatic? You're already winning. Now, we have to factor in what I call deterrence value, that Iran will have to establish or reestablish the concept of deterrence. They had successfully done that in the aftermath of the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, when they fired those ballistic missiles at the Al Assad Air Base, where American troops were, where they fired against Erbil, etc. That let everybody know that there will be consequences if you go too far. The attack on the Iranian consulate, you went too far. So Iran is going to have to reestablish what a red line is and what the consequences are for crossing that red line. But they don't need to do it in a way that people are like, now it's time for Iran to win. Iran's already winning. They don't need to do anything different to win. They just have to reestablish deterrence-based red lines that say don't cross these. But they don't need to deliver the knockout blow. Ladies and gentlemen, the Israeli economy is collapsing as we're sitting here. And how can you be a viable state without a viable economy? And right now, it's unlikely that the Israeli economy is going to recover back to October 6th standards. On October 6th, everybody in Israel was talking about normalization of relations with the Gulf Arab states, United Arab Emirates, with what they did, but with Saudi Arabia. They were talking about the India-Middle East economic corridor that would run, through Haifa into Greece, making connectivity from Europe to Southern Asia through a Middle East that was defined by new relationships with Israel. And Israel was going to profit greatly. Israel was talking about contributing major gas, resources from the Mediterranean to a Turkish energy hub. Which might answer the question of why the Turks haven't put pressure on the Azerbaijanis to cut off oil flowing to Israel, because Turkey's thinking long term in the future. They want this energy hub and they'd like Israeli gas to be part of this. But today, none of that's on the table. It's done. And, even if this war ended today, the bad taste in the mouth of much of the world about Israel, such that nobody's going to do business with Israel again. And so from an Iranian perspective, you've already won. You've created the conditions where, left to its own devices, Israel is a shrinking, national entity. People are going to be starting fleeing Israel. More people are going to flee Israel than who come on Aliyah. And as a result, you get shifting demographics, which, if you're somebody who believes in a one-state solution of the Palestinian state over a two-state solution, makes a one-state solution almost inevitable. I mean, when you have a lot of Israelis, two-state solution's probably the only thing that people are willing to talk about. But as Israel depopulates, what that means, the depopulation means that Israel is no longer viable in the minds of many to be a sustainable national entity, this Jewish homeland, the way it was, originally devised, that Israel is going to become something different. And many people are going to opt not to live in that something different. This is the victory of Iran. This is what Iran has accomplished. This is what Hezbollah has accomplished. This is what Hamas has accomplished. This is what the Houthi have accomplished. This is what the militias in Iraq and Syria have accomplished. Iran doesn't need to change, the calculation, so to speak. They're already winning. So I think that's the reality that we're dealing with right now, is that Iran doesn't need to kill Israel. Israel's killing itself.
And let me add this. I don't know if you can see this book. It's General Giap, People's War, People's Army, right?
Book, yeah.
He's the Viet Cong Insurrection Manual for Underdeveloped Countries. It's very important. I've been reading that book for a while. I'm always reading 2 or 3 books at a time, but that one's important. And what you realize is this, look, what the U.S. or whatever understand, well, in fact, should understand, the way they claim to do war, we can't even do it that way anywhere more, is the clash of 2 powerful peer armies. They come together and they smash it out right now. What NATO is now like, no. We get air supremacy. We fly over you and we bomb you so we don't lose people. And it's not, that's not a good plan anymore. But here's the bottom line. My point is this. I will be willing to bet you that there are people in the resistance who are familiar with this book. What it does is it lays out a strategy for fighting a superpower, right? And it makes it clear there is a strategy that when you're fighting this superpower, they have weaknesses. and those weaknesses can be exploited. That you don't come to a front and everybody goes to, you know, the Russian front to fight the front. No. What does General Diop say? Wherever the enemy is, that's where the front is. If they got a bunch of guys over here, the front's right there where those bunch of guys are. We're going to over there hit them and lead. It makes it clear that it is possible to defeat the superpowers and the big imperial powers, but there's a very specific strategies you have to use so that you get around their strengths, etc. My point being this: I think the Axis of Resistance has a very specific plan, in the same way that the Russians have a specific plan. And they understand when you're going against Israel and the US, and of course, they're going against the same powers. You got Russia, and of course, the UK tries to send a ship every now and then, but their ships don't really run, so they can't really send a ship. But, you know, they're there in spirit, though not in physical form, right? But they understand what they're up against, and they have a specific strategy. And as Scott and I keep saying, the strategy's working. And not only will they not deviate from the strategy, they can't deviate from the strategy because it's winning. And they know that if Iran says, okay, it's time we're going to throw big missiles and we're going to do the clash of the major powers, that's what NATO and Israel, that's how they fight. That's the only way they can fight. If you don't fight like that, they're probably going to lose. You draw them into it's like fighting these Brazilian grapplers, right? They get in close, they grab you, and, you know, you can know everything in the world, man. When those guys get their hand on somebody and those grappling little teeny guys, you're done. They're going to twist your arm around 3 or 4 times and every bone in your body will be broke, right? Well, but they understand that this is what they do, and they want you to fight their fight. So my point being, getting back to, is this: the Axis of Resistance has Israel, the US, and all of NATO fighting their fight. They'll do something performative, you know, to respond, but they're not going to deviate from their fight because they can't. And they already know, as I said, it works. It works. It worked against the French. It worked against the US. It works. It worked in Afghanistan. I don't know if it was the exact thing, but it works. And that's where we are.
Carl, I just want to
expect a big splash from Iran. Go ahead.
I just want to ask you real quick. Have you ever seen that TV series, The Patriot?
No.
Well, it just, I don't want to give it. It's hilarious. It's a CIA based thing, but they have a episode that involves Brazilian grapplers, and 6 brothers who are Brazilian wrestlers, and
the Gracie
the CIA guy gets caught up in them, but he ends up shooting them all and killing them. So but you know, so there is a solution to the grapplers, and it's called a silenced pistol, apparently, but only on TV.
Yeah, if you ain't got one of those, man, those guys, when they get their hands on somebody grappling.
I just had to laugh because as soon as you said that, I went, "Oh, The Patriot." Yes, I remembered Brazilian grapplers.
Well, I mean, I think what both of you are saying is so important because it's not often talked about in this way. We often hear about the huge amounts, and it's important to talk about the huge numbers of Palestinian people that have been, you know, massacred in this fight. But I think history shows that, you know, empires can kill a lot of people, but it doesn't mean they win in the end. And I found recent reports, and maybe we can close on this topic with this for your reactions to the reports that, and the U.S. has denied them, Iran hasn't confirmed them, but the reports that Iran maybe was going through some back channels, telling the United States that it would not attack Israel, it would not strike back against Israel if the United States pressured Israel to finally come to a legitimate ceasefire deal that would work for the resistance. And of course, the United States has denied it. But the fact that Iran is even in a position for that to even seem plausible feels, or at least it gives the sense that what you two are saying, the way that Iran and the Axis of Resistance are fighting this method of warfare, this method of resistance, it works, it's working, and it may not always look pretty, but it's really about the results in the long term. Scott, any comment on that?
I mean, I've read those reports. I would say that it I mean, anything's possible, but I cast a great deal of skepticism on these reports. Um, Again, first and foremost, Iran has to reset deterrence. So the idea that Iran's going to allow this attack against Iranian soil, because that's what a consulate is, and that there will not be retaliation, I think is just absurd. That there must be not just retaliation, but demonstrable retaliation that reestablishes the red line of deterrence, because Israel crossed it flagrantly. So I can't see Iran foregoing a retaliation against Israel. Two, um, it makes it sound like Hamas is desperate for a ceasefire. Hamas isn't desperate for a ceasefire. Hamas has rejected unacceptable ceasefire terms. I mean, if Hamas was dying and desperate, a drowning person will accept the life ring from just about anybody as long as it prevents them from going down. Bad deals have been put on the table, and Hamas said, "Pound sand, we're not doing it." Hamas isn't desperate. Hamas has a strategic goal and objective, and that strategic goal and objective has been, supported by the axis of resistance, including Iran. And so I don't see Hamas. I mean, Hamas would be telling the Iranians, "Stay out of this, man. We got this thing. And that's what they've been telling everybody. Stay out of it. We don't need your help. We've got this. I mean, whatever you've been doing to help us, keep doing it. But it's not like we're failing and you have to come in." Guys, I just want to point out the Israeli army withdrew from the vast majority of Gaza the other day. How bad can it be going for Hamas? I mean, I know 33,000 dead Palestinians. So they were always going to die. I don't mean to be too callous here. A lot of people have jumped on me for this one. But guys, wake the blank up. All right. Do you really think Hamas are a bunch of school children that don't understand the reality of war? Do you think the Palestinian people don't understand the sacrifice necessary to achieve a Palestinian state? Do you not think any Palestinian realizes that if it weren't for October 7th, they'd be stuck in October 6th forever, that there would never be a Palestinian state? This is why I continuously bring up Charles de Gaulle and D-Day. He was briefed that there were going to be 80 to 120,000 French civilians killed to liberate Normandy. Not France, Normandy. To liberate Normandy, that many would be killed. Now, the good news is only 60,000 died. 60,000 French civilians died during the Battle of Normandy to liberate France. This is why Charles de Gaulle never went to a D-Day reunion, because he couldn't bear the pain, because he signed off on that. He knew that by going over the beach, by bombing Cannes, by bombing the railroads, by putting all that suppression down, that the French civilians were going to be slaughtered, and they were. If you don't think Hamas knew what Israel was going to do to the Palestinian people, then you live on la land. What is the Daya doctrine? Everybody knew it existed. Everybody knew about the massive retaliation, mowing the grass. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew that Israel was going to go genocidal. Do you think nobody knew that Netanyahu was going to bring up Amalek? Do you think this is the first time that a right-wing idiot in Israel brought up Amalek, brought up genocide? Do you not read the Bible? Do you not know what, and I mispronounced it, but it's not Purim, it's Purim, I guess, the holiday. You know what the holiday is, if they just had it, Purim. It's the celebration of Esther, in the Queen of Babylon, who flipped the script on the seed of Amalek, Haman, who survived because Saul didn't fulfill Samuel's demand to annihilate the Amalekites. He let King Agag live, and he killed King Agag, but some fled. And as a result, an advisor to the king of Babylon was saying, "Let's kill all the Jews in Babylon." And Esther flipped the script on him and killed him and all his people. They celebrate the completion of the genocidal command given to Saul from Samuel. This is part of the Jewish way of thinking, ladies and gentlemen. The normal Jews, the rational Jews go, don't worry about it. That's just sort of biblical overplay. But the right-wing people who are running Israel, that's in their flesh and blood. That's what they stand for. That's what they believe in. That's why Israeli soldiers are chanting, "The seed of Amalek, we will complete the mission." That's why you have everybody in the Israeli chain of command talking about the Palestinians as being human animals, which means they don't have rights. They don't have anything. Hamas knew this and did it anyways. Why? Because it's the only way you're going to get a Palestinian state. You have to confront the Israeli Zionist entity, and you have to defeat it. And you can only defeat it on the battlefield. And that battlefield is on the ground in Gaza, but it's around the world. Show me one place that Hamas is losing right now. Show me one place Hamas is losing, and you can't. The Israeli army just withdrew from Gaza. Does that mean Hamas is losing? I don't think so. The International Court of Justice has heard a genocide case and found it sympathetic. Does that mean that Hamas is losing? I don't think so. Russia invited Hamas to meet with the PLO in Moscow to talk about post-conflict governance that's inclusive of Hamas. Does that mean Hamas is losing? Not at all. Hamas is winning this war. It's a horrible war, and the price the Palestinian people pay is unbearable. But it's a price that has to be paid if there's going to be a Palestinian state. And so I think we need to understand where we're at in this conflict right now. Israel is losing hands down. Iran knows it. Hamas knows it. Hezbollah knows it. Everybody knows it. The Israelis know it. But Netanyahu can't afford to say, okay, well, we've lost. Let's cut our, let's cut our losses. Let's regroup, because that means he has to leave being prime minister. Now comes the big part here for the Israelis. This is all about Netanyahu. This isn't about Israel. This isn't about existential survival for Israel. It's about Bibi Netanyahu sacrificing the Israeli state for his own personal security, because he knows that if he stops being prime minister, he's going to get arrested instantly. And he's going to go on trial for corruption charges. And he's going to lose that trial and spend the rest of his life in prison. So he right now is playing for the pardon. He's hanging on until he gets the deal cut. The deal that says when you resign, you won't be prosecuted. You can now afford to step away. But notice he is sacrificing Israelis. He's sacrificing Israel's standing in the world. He's sacrificing Palestinians, which he doesn't care about because they're human animals. But he's sacrificing everything, human life, human dignity, for himself. He's the ultimate narcissist. I mean, but this is what it comes down to. This is about Bibi Netanyahu. It's not about anything else. The moment Bibi Netanyahu steps aside as prime minister, 9/10 of these problems go away.
I saw an interview with a member of the Palestinian leadership, and they, went after him. They said, well, if you'd have done this, didn't you know that Israel was going to react like that and that lots of your people would die? And he brought up Algeria. He said they lost 6 million people to the French in their resistance to the French. And he says, in hindsight, should they have not resisted? Ultimately, Algeria is a free country now. They lost 6 million people. They understood when they fought that there was going to be a price to pay, right? So I think I'm with Scott. I listened to this guy say, look, we understood there was going to be a price to pay, but, in the long run, we'll never have freedom. And let me add this. I think Israel's destroyed. I think Israel's wiped out. I think it's over for Israel, because when this thing is over, ultimately, who's going to buy? I mean, who's going to buy? The only way you'll be able to sell something from Israel is that if you take off the Made in Israel stamp and change it to something else. They will boycott a supermarket if they sell a single date from Israel. No one's going to want to buy, Israel's high tech. The software, the hardware that they sell. Who's going to want to buy Israeli software? They'll, people will boycott their companies. The people who live in Israel, they ain't going back. It's not going to be safe. Their economy shot. So really, they're paying a high price, but history.